Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Good morning and hello, elite achievers. How are you doing this fine day? You feeling good? You ready for some modern leadership? This week, I've been reading a great book on creating opportunity called Blue Ocean Strategy, about creating this uncontested market space and making your competition irrelevant. And I want you to think about that for just a second. What would uncontested market space mean for your business? What can you do today to make competition irrelevant? And that's my challenge for you this week. Think about one thing, just one thing that you can do in your business that will drive you towards market dominance. And to help you do that, I have invited my new friend, Jason Treu, to join us today to discuss how we can build a high-performing culture within our offices. Because when people like each other, when they enjoy working together, they collaborate more, they resolve conflicts better, and we as business owners lose less time to illness. These are all good things, right? Jason is an executive coach working with corporate executives, rising stars, and entrepreneurs to maximize their leadership potential. He's the best-selling author of Social Wealth, a how-to guide on building extraordinary business relationships, a TEDx speaker, and a card game inventor. Jason hosts the Executive Breakthrough podcast, and today he is our modern leader. Jason, so many exciting things happening with you right now. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on the show and speaking to your fantastic tribe.
Well, and this is going to be a lot of fun because like I told you in the pre-podcast intro, your background and what you're teaching on, I think is so valuable. And let me give you a little background. Well, before we jump into that, let me just say, we got a little bit of your business intro. How about a little personal or anything we missed in that intro?
Well, I've taken up running. And it's really interesting because I've applied the same stuff in my business as I did to my running, because I woke up one day in January and was like, I need a new fitness goal. And I decided to run a half marathon 5 weeks later. And I hadn't been running that much other than going to a cardio class. And that's like 3 miles probably, or right around. And so I found a virtual running coach, the best running group in Dallas. I spoke to many of them. And then I started running. My first outdoor run was 2.5 weeks before the half marathon. And I ended up running the half marathon in like an hour and 52 minutes, which is an 8:32 pace, which is pretty good for someone at that point. And I've continued it. And last week I ran another half marathon in an hour and 43, which is like a 7:47 pace. So that's pretty good in a short period of time. And I think it's all applying principles of best practice knowledge by asking people, getting coaching, mentoring, and then having support. And it's pretty amazing. And so then I'm applying for Chicago Marathon in October, and I'm hoping to qualify for the Boston Marathon, which, I mean, someone's first year of running to qualify for a Boston Marathon is pretty unusual, to say the least.
Well, this is incredible. I mean, you're absolutely right. And running a 7:30 mile or running an 8:30 mile, you said it's pretty good for someone who doesn't run often. That's pretty good, period. And I love what you're saying about the lessons that you apply to your business, the lessons that we all apply and need to be applying to our business can translate to many aspects of our lives, not just in business, not just in family, not just in goal setting within our business lives, but also our personal lives. And so I appreciate that little bit of a background. Now I want to jump in and talk a little bit about what you do for your business, because like I started to say, what you're doing is so vitally important. And I want to give you a little background. So a couple of months ago, I joined a law firm as a consulting partner. I came in to help this law firm really dig out of some of the troubles and struggles that they were having. And the first thing I noticed was this staff morale problem. And so I want to jump into your book a little bit. And so tell us about your book and how you came up with the idea. And then I want to talk to you about some of the principles and how I can apply that in my business and also the listeners.
I think the key that we have to understand is building relationships is central to any of our success. And you have got to find ways to build quick relationships with people that go deep, because otherwise you'll never emotionally connect with them. And when you never emotionally connect with them, people don't think you care. And when they don't think you care, then you kill the most important factor, trust. And trust is the glue that keeps any relationship together, right? So, my book, Social Wealth, goes into that, as well as, my TED Talk and the Cards Against Mundanity game. And I think it all sort of flows together, is that when you can start building great relationships with people really quickly in a business setting, you communicate, you collaborate, you resolve conflicts, because people operate at their highest level because they care about people around it. So it's almost like you're doing leadership, management, and other training for people for free.
Well, as we look at this, one of the things that jumps out to me as a leader, our day is very full, and we're trying to find time to do this and check email. And we're also trying to find time to, work on the business, not just in the business. And so when we hear these things like, we need to spend more time getting to know our team and getting to know our staff, a couple of questions pop into my mind. And the first one is this: how do we find time? And then after we talk about that, I want to talk about, how do we keep this business professional, I'm the leader relationship, but still create these relationships with our colleagues and coworkers and those that, we lead? So let's start the first one with the timing.
Well, I think that the time, if you look at the research, right, the most productive and effective teams in the entire world, right, by tons of research, all go and saying the people that have the best relationships and know people do the best. So look at Google's research, right? So one of the most amazing things is I look at HR departments, and the problem with 99% of them is they don't understand what's actually really going on and why people show up at work and what they really need. I mean, because if you look at Google, they did a research called Project Aristotle, and anyone can Google this research and look at it. They spent 3 years and millions of dollars and hired researchers from all the top universities to come in and try to find patterns to build the perfect team, right? They were basically going to take this recipe and hire everyone based off of it to increase performance in the company and stock price, right? Mm-hmm. And so they looked at all of the patterns they had in the company on their top 180 performing teams, and they could not figure out what those secret recipe was at all, right? And then they had a researcher that stumbled across a team whose manager told the entire team that he had stage 4 cancer and that he might die. And within the next 6 months, that team performance skyrocketed. And what they figured out, the number one reason, and the only thing across all 180 teams, and I hope people really take this in, because you've now gotten the best research in the world coming to you right at this very moment. It's psychological safety. And psychological safety is knowing people in a deep personal connection. It's being able to raise controversial ideas and ask questions without worrying about someone making fun of you. And it's gone so far that Google spends $1 billion a year on this other company called Project X, where they're looking at things like turning seawater into gas and flying cars and everything else. And the first part of the training inside of that organization is all on psychological safety. It's not on the company. It's not on what they're doing. It's all on that. So that's one thing. The other piece of research, which I thought was really fascinating, is a professor, his name is Professor Arthur Aaron, was trying to find how you can make fast friends so you can start having deep, meaningful relationships with people really quickly in your life. And he looked at various things, and he had 54 grad students who were complete strangers and didn't know each other at all and had no background information go in a room and over 45 minutes ask each other 36 questions. And at the end of 45 minutes, he asked them to take a survey, and 30% of the people rated a relationship they just created with a complete stranger they had no knowledge of as the closest relationship in their life. And I thought that's pretty incredible to think that you can do that. And anyone who has a really deep, meaningful relationship in their life knows that those people care for them and will do almost anything for them. Well, why would you not want to work with those people rather than working with people who either dislike you or really could care less about you?
And both of these studies are incredible, and I want to unpack them just a little bit. So with this Google study, with this Aristotle program that they put together, we're looking at teams, 180 teams they had so many different diversities within them. You know, their makeup, their backgrounds, all the things that they were working on were all so different, but they were high performing. That was the one thing that they had in common, and they wanted to find out what created that ability to high perform, what other commonality they could find. And all that they could find is this psychological safety. And so I want to unpack that just a little bit more and talk about this psychological safety, because I think culturally, especially when it comes to business, and I'll tell you, Jason, I have an MBA. So when I was going through business school, there's kind of this culture that, when you're in business, when you're a leader, you're in the corner office, you shut your door, you put your head down, you do your work, you put in 90 hours a week of work. And one of the big mistakes I made in graduate school was I did just that. I took that culture and I put my head down and I studied hard and I worked hard. And what I missed out on, and what I think you're saying, I missed out on going out to happy hour with the rest of the students. I missed out on, connecting on not just a business level or an educational level, but on a personal level. And so as we look at Google, in this program, and you talk about spending $1 billion, how are they doing this to tear down some of the stereotypes and some of the culture of, I just go in and get my head, put my head down and work?
Well, I think when it comes to that culture, what they're doing is prioritizing getting to know people and doing it and rating on their performance, right? And valuing it and giving people monetary compensation on how they're operating inside of the team.
But how do you do it without sounding like we're forcing it? So, for example, I come into my team here at the office. We're just a small team of 10. And I say to my team, all right, guys, we need to get together. We need to learn about each other. So, everyone, let's hold hands, go around the room and talk about what's important to us. How do we do it without being cheesy?
Well, I think you have to do things to get people to share about their personal life with other people in a way that is not going to put them on the defensive and it's going to make it fun for them. So, a couple things is one we can talk about is playing my game Cards Against Mundanity, which is a game that it's similar to Cards Against Humanity, except you go around and you talk about workplace and personal things, and people just pick up a card and ask a question and you answer it and people share it. Because once you start sharing in a group of people have a lot more empathy for you because they go and look at your shared experiences. They also go for your shared emotions, meaning that if you've been disappointed and they've been disappointed, you connect with people on another level, right? And when you start to get to know people more in depth, you start to like them more because it's hard to hate people up close, or it's even hard to dislike them up close because you find so many commonalities, right? Another thing that you can do, and that I've had clients do, is you go in the beginning of a staff meeting and you hold up a picture and, you get like 30 seconds to talk about why is that picture meaningful to you. Because then you're sharing part of yourself to other people. And every time I have people do the picture exercise, I've done it in like several dozen clients, every single time within 6 months or less, people rate that as their favorite meeting of the week because they actually get to know people and they're sharing things, right? So you have to find ways for people to show up and be seen, right? Because people's core essence is they want to belong, going back to caveman days. And so that is your job, right? It's like I have other executives who I make them walk around the office, right, for 15 minutes for 3 days a week for 30 days. And I say to them, tell me the difference in the end of 30 days. I'll take you out to dinner if you feel like that's been a mistake on me, right? And every time they say, wow, I cannot believe how much I've learned. People are coming up and talking to me. They're bringing problems. They're bringing solutions. They're much more engaged. People are happier. Why? Because you're getting to know the people around you and you're showing people that you care, right? And that's 45 minutes a week. That's not an hour. That's not 2 hours. That's all that is, right? So, those are just 3 examples. But if you do those 3 things, you're going to see a significant impact in your performance, people's engagement, their collaboration and communication within a few weeks.
Yeah, and the time and the return on time invested is so valuable. When you talk about 45 minutes or an hour, a week, the outcome is huge for that. And I got to tell a quick story. I came from a company, a small business up in San Jose, California, and it was the culture of my boss. He was a hard worker. He was a kind of a stern guy, really get to business, and a great operator. I mean, a guy I looked up to tremendously. But he had that culture that you just talked about. Every afternoon, about 3 o'clock, when he started to wear down and he needed a little break, he would walk around the office, poke his head up over everybody's cubicle, and just say hi, just find out what's going on. And occasionally he'd grab a couple people and walk down to Starbucks and grab a coffee. And the cultural impact for that 15, 10 minutes a day, maybe $3, $6 in coffee, was tremendous. Now, a couple of things that you mentioned that I want to make sure that we reiterate for the listeners. One is people want to belong. From the days of the caveman, people want to be part of a society. They want to feel like they're part of something maybe bigger than themselves. We have it innate in us. And that by doing this, getting out, understanding each other, working with one another, we really satisfy that innate desire we have to be part of something bigger, to be part of a team. The second thing I want to reiterate for our team here, for our listeners, and this is, you glossed over your card game, Questions Against
Mundanity.
Cards. Thank you. Cards Against Mundanity. And I downloaded this game and I read the instructions and I read through the cards, and I want to dive into this just a little bit more because I think we glossed over it too quickly. So why don't you explain this game, because I think this will be very valuable for the listeners to pick up and try out in their businesses.
Well, one of the things I wanted to do is, after I saw that Arthur Aaron story, and the other piece of data here that's really, really disturbing is loneliness is at the highest rates that it's ever been in recorded history. It's at 40% of the U.S. Population, and loneliness is feeling lonely. It's not being alone. And feeling lonely, they have now proven beyond a doubt through scientific data over decades that loneliness is the same thing as not eating food and not having water and not having shelter. You will die, right? They've also proven it that people who feel lonely, the equivalent in their health is the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And more people die from, loneliness than heart disease and high blood pressure. It's unreal at the epidemic that it's causing across the United States in people's mental health decline, and it will kill you much earlier in their life. So when you go to work today, the other thing is that it's not about work-life separation. It's not about work-life integration. Work and your life are the same because people don't have these social connections. And on top of it, if you look at the data back in 1970 and 80, they looked at people and asked them, well, how many really go-to people do you have? People that you can count on through thick and thin, that you can tell anything to. And the average person in the United States, and the survey is a couple thousand people, said 2 to 3. They did the survey a couple years ago, and it's 0 to 1. So the workplace is where people are getting their personal fulfillment as well as their professional. It is one and the same. So I looked at something and I thought to myself, well, if that's there, and along with other tons of data that proves performance and fulfillment, then I want to find a way to build relationships quickly so you can build a great workplace environment like Google is doing and being, on the top of Forbes list every year, with doing it with very little or no money at all. So I used part of the principles talked about Arthur Aaron in asking questions and creating a game where you sit around a room and people ask each other questions, right? You pick up a card, and there are 2 stacks of cards. One are, conversation starters, which are easier questions. They're like, okay, what was your favorite summer job and why? And then there are connection questions, which are deeper questions. And they're, if you could pick 1 year of your life to do over, which one would it be and why? And, you get 2 minutes to answer a question. You go around the room several times. And at the end, every person has 1 minute to share, 3 things that they learned about different people, because that shows that you're listening and engaged with people, And you'd be amazed at what happens during that time and people's ability to share, because the other part of it is that most people never ask these questions of other people, right? So I had someone say to me, well, I've known my team for 10 years, so how can this help? And I thought to myself, okay, that's a logical question. So I gave this to 10 people that had been married and were in happy marriages, or people that were best friends for more than 20 years, and asked them to play this game. And all of them said to me that after playing this game for 1 hour, it fundamentally changed the relationship that I had with my spouse or my friend, because I learned information that I never knew before that gave me insights into that person that is going to improve the relationship that we have, right? So you can imagine what that does for people who don't know each other.
Yeah, and I took this game and I went through the cards, and I think you're absolutely right. These conversation starters are just tremendous way to get the ball rolling, to really get to know each other. And I can see how in any relationships, whether they're business or personal, that these can be very beneficial, that they can be very helpful. But how do we avoid, we've all been to networking events where we have to play find somebody who went to Africa, find somebody who likes the color red and sign their name in a box. And it's just become kind of this cheesy, I don't know that I want to do it. It's uncomfortable. How do we avoid, as we're playing this game or any game, get to know you with our team, to avoid this, mundanity?
Yeah, I don't really think when you play it and go around it, it seems cheesy, because people are sharing personal stuff. And I think one of the things that you do is the leader in the room needs to go first. Because what happens is that when the leader is vulnerable, then everyone else is vulnerable, because people wait around for someone else to start sharing first. And when they do, people just start pouring out, because people want to be seen, right? They want to be heard. People want to have people that understand and know them, because they have very few people or zero that really do. And they walk around feeling invisible. So it doesn't feel cheesy, because you're actually sharing an other person is. And when the leader walks in a room and he picks up a card and he, shares something very personal about himself, right? I tell them all to take a connection question. So you're going to get a pretty vulnerable question. I've never seen that someone feels like it's cheesy ever, of running this stuff in dozens and dozens of places and getting feedback from people, right? I don't think it works like that, because it doesn't come off, and it's not in a networking type of way. It's a getting to know you because I care enough to do it.
And that's the point that I was trying to draw out on this, is that there's a big difference between being in a room full of strangers where you're forced to approach another stranger and ask them a personal question, and being in a team atmosphere where we're kind of directing the attention towards one person. And I think that distinction makes it more comfortable. The other thing is, this is a team that we're going to spend a lot of time with. I mean, you look at the average workday is growing for most people. We used to work from 9 to 5, then it was 8 to 5, then it was 8 to 6. Now it's like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And it could grow even from there. And the reason that we're spending so much time together, the reason that it's so important that we understand and grow together, is because we do spend so much time with each other. But I want to ask you, now I'm not the leader of a company. Let's say, for example, that I'm just one of the rank and file, and I want to get to know our team a little bit better, but I'm not in a position where I can say, hey team, let's gather around the water cooler and play this game. How can I help implement some of these things within my business when I'm leading maybe from the bottom up?
Well, I think you can play with other people. I think you can go to your manager and suggest to do it. I think you could go to HR. I think you could go to anywhere. It's not that hard to sell something into other people, because everyone's looking for something to do, right? When you mention and bring up saying, hey, I want to build a better team, that we work and collaborate and communicate better, here's an easy suggestion, and it's essentially free. Who's really going to say no? And I think people like playing it. He's saying, hey, this is a game like Cards Against Humanity. Let's go play it together. And you can rally some people yourself and just get them in a room and start playing it. It's going to work. You just have to get people in fun. You can buy a pizza for people and say, hey, I'm going to buy pizza. Let's all sit down and do this. And you can take 4 colleagues, right? You don't need to have a leader do this. Just someone needs to start it, and you can play it on your own, right? So it's like vulnerability, right? You have to take the lead. You have to be the leader. You don't need a leader to do it. You just have to lead and then put it together and take a little bit of time, and you can have great relationships, right? You could do this if you're involved in a charity. You could do this if you're in a school. You can do this with other friends. You can do this with family. I mean, you can do this with anyone, right? I mean, it applies in any situation. I'm just using it for a workplace, but the questions work the same and the outcomes are the same.
And leadership is a mindset. And so it doesn't matter where you're at within the company, you can be a leader. We can lead from the bottom up. We can lead from the middle. And the other thing you mentioned is that this game is essentially free. And we're going to give them a link at the end of this podcast where they can go and pick up a copy of this game and get playing it. But when you said this game is essentially free, I want to take you back a little bit and say, not only is this game free as in no cost to you, but it actually raises money for your company. It actually builds business in your company. Because one of the things you say is that engaged employees have a 19%, statistics show or research has shown a 19% increase in operating income over a 12-month period. And so if you went to HR or you went to your manager and you said, look, I've got a way that we as a team can increase profits, can increase operating income by 19% over the next 12 months, and it's not going to cost you a thing. All it's going to cost you is maybe 30 minutes or 40 minutes, once in a while. Would you do it? And I can't imagine an HR or a manager that wouldn't say, hey, let's look into this a little bit more. And so that statistic, I think, really helps sell this opportunity or this idea of getting together as a team, does it not?
Yeah. And then there's also data that, if you have a very good to best friend at work, you're 7 times more productive and your retention rate is 7 times higher. I mean, all the data out there, and I have tons of it, in my TED Talk speech, and, there are other places too that all go to that, right? Replacing an employee costs anywhere between 100% of their salary and 300%. So it's not just that you're hiring someone for $50,000. That employee is going to cost you at least $50,000 plus another $50,000 to $150,000, right? So losing people costs you a ridiculous amount of money as well, right? So this goes to the retention side of the business as well. So the impact is significant across the board, and it just goes to a fundamental thing that we all want to belong, right? And when people like each other, they treat each other differently. I mean, just think to yourself, people listening. Think about the people at work that you like. Would you not agree that you would compromise on issues? Do you believe that you would not bring up all the little nitpicky things? Would you communicate and collaborate? Are you thinking about how to make them successful, right? Now think about the people that you dislike or really just are neutral. Do you treat them the same way? Do you care about them the same way? Do you care about their success, right? And the answers are no, right? So when we can elevate those people from dislike to neutral, and from people who are neutral to people that you like, and from people that you like to people that you love, imagine what that will do for your success and all of the people around you. And if you can do it quickly and no money, why would you not do that for yourself, right? Even if you're just in for personal gain.
Yeah, the return on time invested. All right. So at the start of this podcast, Jason, I told you that I wanted to go down 2 tracks. We talked about the first one. Now, briefly, I want to jump into the second one because it's one that's been burning on my mind ever since I started reading the materials you sent over prior to the podcast. And that is, how do we keep it professional? So now I'm the boss of a 10-person team, and I stand up and I'm really vulnerable with my team. I kind of share some of my passions or some of the things I'm interested in, things that I would change. How do I keep it professional and my team still understands, hey, guess what, guys? I'm the boss. Yeah, I want to connect with you, but I also need you to really perform. We have our KPIs that are important. How do I keep it professional while still being vulnerable?
Well, I think you have boundaries, right? And I think inside of the culture that you set, how people treat each other, how you engage on a professional level, and those things all exist within people, right? And within organizations. So you just have to hold to them and make people treat each other in that fashion and be professional at all times. And I think that that's the key, right? Sharing with people and going to lunch or sitting down for 15 minutes is not about the rest of the day and how you engage with other people, right? And the point of having psychological safety with people is that you do treat them well and you care about them and understand boundaries. And, that you will listen to them more and share ideas and be more innovative and creative, but it's not on the negative side, right? And it's with vulnerability, I think the problem is that people misunderstand that with oversharing, right? It's kind of like you're not a vulnerable person if you're an owner of a company and you get your board together and tell them that you feel like you're a bad manager and everything's going to fall apart around you, right? That's called oversharing. You have to know your audience when you communicate with people and who has earned the right to hear your story. And that is specific audiences for specific reasons.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and I appreciate you bringing that back full circle for us, because I think we've got a lot of listeners to this episode of the podcast that are leaders, that are managers, that are business owners and entrepreneurs, and that have teams, and I think they're a little bit nervous of how oversharing is going to affect. And I love that distinction. We're not talking about oversharing, and we're not talking about giving people a pass on their responsibilities and on what we expect from them. We're talking about understanding that they are humans and that there are things going on in their lives that are important to them and affect how they come to work. And the more we can grow together as a team, the more impact their work is going to be on our bottom line. And so, Jason, I think this is a tremendous topic. As I look at our time, we're running a little bit low. And before I let you go, I want to jump over and find out a little bit of personal to go along with this business conversation that we've been having by jumping into a little section I call Learning from Leaders. How does that sound?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. So we're looking at your bookshelf now. And what book is currently on your Kindle or bedside table?
Brene Brown, I'm reading it again, Braving the Wilderness. She is the best leadership and management author out there by far. And it's the only books I typically recommend to any of my clients.
And so give us just a little background of this book and what it's about.
Well, Braving the Wilderness is really creating belonging in your community, in your business, and with yourself. And I think that that's a really important factor. And I think it just goes along with what the conversation we're having today and with all the political environments going out there today. And I think it opens up people to realize that you have to first belong to yourself. And what that requires you to do, to have a vision of your own life, to have your own values and stand up for them, and to be able to move through periods where you may be all alone. You may be doing something that's crazy, but you're true to yourself, and the people will follow your tribe because you'll find them, right? But if you hide who you are and you just focus on external circumstances and trying to please other people, you're going to wake up and you're going to realize how alone you really are. And so that's part of it. And it goes into different theories and other things of practices that you can do that directly relate to business and being a effective leader. And part of it also goes into talking about, the three things that leaders do great. And I truly believe this is one, they know their own emotions, right? They understand their thoughts and behaviors. And then they do the same with other people, because that's empathy and they're able to relate with them. And the third thing is to be able to have tough conversations with people, because most people shy away from having difficult conversations or they put them off. And the real leaders and great managers don't, because they tackle them head on, because then you resolve conflicts and you move forward much quicker. And you don't have any of this residual or under the skin emotions that keep bubbling over.
Yeah, that sounds like a fascinating book, and thank you for sharing it. All right, how about the best movie ever made?
Probably my favorite movie is either Rocky and more because of that, because of the background and how Sylvester Stallone actually made the movie and what he had to go through along with it. And I love Shawshank Redemption. That's another movie that's probably up there at the top for me. But there's so many. It's hard. I love movies, so that's hard to pick one.
Right. And I'm the same way. How about your leadership superpower?
I'm really good at really understanding relationships, human behavior, and how people connect with each other.
Which is so important for someone who is in coaching and creating opportunities for teams to connect. How about a motivational quote, mantra, or philosophy that you live by?
I think it's end of the day, and Maya Angelou talked about this, and that, and the end of the quote is, it's not about how you interact with people. It's not how you talk with them. It's really how you make them feel. And I think that's really the key, because we're all emotional beings and we run on emotions. And end of the day, your ability to be empathetic as a leader and as a manager is going to set the tone, because if you don't understand what other people are doing and how they're feeling and where they're coming from, you're never going to be able to relate to them and find a win-win situation, because it's always going to be about your agenda and your ego. And that's what kills most leaders, is their inability to be empathetic and their ego.
You can't be a leader without followers, and no one wants to follow the ego. They want to follow someone who has vision and passion and dream and is going to lead them to some place they can't go on their own. They don't want to follow someone that they don't respect or trust or feel uncomfortable around. So I love that. And finally, the best book ever written.
I'm telling you, literally probably most of Brene Brown's I would go back and I would probably read again, from a business standpoint, because I think you could pick up any of these books and really, I think, get a significant amount of personal and professional information that will be life-changing, because it's a lot about your self-awareness, but then social awareness and really understanding how people tick and what really drives them.
All right, Jason, we have spent a great amount of time here talking about psychological safety and about being professional within our businesses and creating an opportunity for our teams to gel together. Before we let you go, is there any last bit of advice that you would give to us? And then tell us, how can we pick up a copy or pick up Cards Against Mundanity or a copy of your book?
Yep. So, I would tell you again that, when you go to work every day, realize that every person walks in a door, a couple things happens. They don't drop their personal baggage. So their personal things are going to affect them. So supporting people and understanding them is really helpful. Two, they're human beings just like you, and they have fears, they have uncertainty. And so building the connections and asking people how you're doing, getting to know them, will serve you and will serve them really well. And you can pick up Cards Against Mundanity by going to cardsagainstmundanity.com, and you can download it. You'll get the game instructions. I give helpful hints inside of there. I tell you exactly how to roll it out. You basically just print it off, cut out the cards, put it on a table, set up as under 5 minutes. And I give you suggestions on things you can do beforehand and afterwards on the game. And then if you want to go, my website, it's Jason, and my last name is Treu.com. So it's Troy, but spelled Treu, and it has tons of information. And my book, Social Wealth, is on Amazon.
And we're going to link all of that up on the show notes to this episode. And I highly encourage the listeners to go out and pick up a copy of this Cards Against Mundanity. I did it myself. It's very well put together. It's an exciting game to try to draw your team together. Give it a try. Jason, we love this conversation with you. Thanks for being this week's Modern Leader.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
What a fascinating topic, and I couldn't agree with Jason more as far as building this psychological safety within our work environments, with the teams that we lead and the people that we interact with. The more we get along, the better friends that we are on a personal level, the more productivity that we're going to get. And I love this quote from his book. Have you ever admired those successful, confident, motivated, and charismatic people who seem to have it all? They've climbed the corporate ladder quickly or started great businesses. They've made all the right connections. What is their secret? And now we know. This is what this whole episode was about. The biggest predictor of success is this social wealth, this quick, deep relationship building that can happen within our working environments. The other thing that really jumped out to me in this episode that I really enjoyed talking about, and that is loneliness is not being alone. And we live in an environment now where, cell phones and social media, and we're connected more than we ever have been. And yet, as Jason talked about, we're lonelier than we ever have been. And that's because we're spending so many hours at work and we're not building relationships with those that we work with. So grab yourself a copy of Cards Against Mundanity. Look at Jason's book, dive into what we talked about here in this episode, and really figure out how you can bring that psychological safety into your work environment. Of course, everything we talked about can be found on the show notes for this episode, which are at jakeacarlson.com/ML63 for Modern Leadership 63. And until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life. Stay away from mundanity and stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.